you gonna get free this time? Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
Welcome back to You, Me, and the Elephant with Deb Air.
And crystal clear, baby.
Are you enough?
Yes. No. Maybe so.
We've been pondering about this question. Are you enough? And I was sharing with Crystal earlier this morning about some inner reflections that I've been having about myself. And I feel like for me, when something comes in of awareness, it comes in through a small gateway that gets my attention. And then as I sit with it, the room opens and I start to see broader connections of how things relate, if that makes sense.
I pictured a window open. I like gateway
Yeah,
too.
there you go. Yeah, I've said this to people too in my practice that when their nervous system expands what it's capable of digesting, it's like looking through a window. And if you saw a raging river and you saw a little 2-year-old child by that raging river and that was all you saw, what would you do?
Panic.
Yeah, right? Or jump out the window,
Jump out the window.
Yeah,
Yes. Mayday.
probably.
Fight or
Yeah.
flight. Yes.
Yeah,
Rescue mission.
call for help.
Yes.
And so sometimes things come in and it may come in that way. And it's not always going to be something that is panicky, but it comes in through this smaller window. But when you can be with that and you can broaden your awareness of it, it's like blowing out the whole wall. And so now there's this whole wide range picture view window, and you still see the same raging river. You still see the 2-year-old, but now you see a parent that's literally an inch next to them, and you are looking at the same life, but you're seeing more and you're having a completely different response because you're probably not going to panic because you see that that child has an adult right there close by.
I love that
So,
example.
yeah, thank you. One of the things that was coming in one of my reflections about myself was this whole duality of, most of us want to be a good person. We want to think positively. We want to feel happy. We want to be on this light side of life. I mean, who doesn't?
That's right.
Who doesn't? We
We
all
want
wanna
that green.
feel.
We want that greener grass side.
That's right. So there is that part, right, that we want to step into more. And there's also this other part that's a little not on the other side of the
That's right.
grass. The grass is dead, it's dark, it's shadowy, and
The side that needs watering.
really well said. So I think the backdrop of Are You Enough? What came in the bigger filter as I kind of blew out the window, something that came in that I reflected on myself, which I'll share in a minute, but is like this underneath that is this feeling of enoughness. I think that life is this experience of, am I enough, in all the different ways that that can come in.
Yes.
Even if we're not thinking about it so literally in that way,
That's right.
right?
And even
So
is it enough? So not only I am the person, but is the experience enough or the action? Am I doing enough? Is the behavior enough? The enough
right,
is
which I
encapsulated.
think comes
Right
down
in
to,
it.
am I enough? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it is.
It's like, if am I doing enough? Am I
That's right.
being enough? And I can't remember if you were on which workshop, but I was doing this live virtual workshop. As I was speaking, this chord came out and tears started running down my face. And there was this reality of, and I think this is going to tie into what we're talking about, we'll see, is that I could feel a truth in me that felt like through my whole lifetime, as long as I live in this body, there'll be an aspect of self that will never feel like I'm enough.
Mm.
And when that hit me, it hit me so profoundly, and it hit the pain of that. But it's weird. Simultaneously, there was this feeling of the relief, because I think that when we're on either a healing path or we're, all the things we just mentioned, that we want to kind of lean towards the grass is greener,
Mm-hmm.
that we're trying to get away from this feeling of somehow having lack or being not enough
Mm-hmm.
or not doing enough, like you said. Is that enough? And I feel like if life was just that, then we are fooling ourselves, because I don't know anyone out there that I've met that has never had a feeling that is not comfortable, that has no inner critic, that has no place that self-judges themselves. But yet we want to push away from that and go to the light. And so I think as a foundation to this conversation, that I want to talk about that duality that occurs within all of us of this potential self. The grass is always greener. It's that potential self. It is the capital S self, depending on your schools of thought, your higher self, your true self, your soul self, and the light being that you are. And then there's this inner critic, inner judge, a dark, some people feel demons, right? They may disassociate, but that there's some aspect of shadow. You hear people talking about shadow work more and more, but that this polarity exists within us. And as I was having this awareness about myself earlier, I was simultaneously aware that there's this duality that exists, meaning I had an awareness that I didn't love about myself, but I also had compassion for myself. And if we can understand that if you were to go all the way on one side, you'll never be enough. And then all the way on the other side, you will always be more than enough. And then our life exists in this dance between and within that reality of existence. So that's the foundation that I want to play with today as we explore, are you enough? And are you enough sits in between and through this experience that we all share.
I
Simply
like
being in
that.
this body, being in this life,
That's right.
breathing, living. And yet I think a lot of us have this secret desire of utopia, of it's just all sunshine and rainbows. And I think sometimes that's why it's so hard when things happen that don't go our way.
Yeah.
Because if the more we've denied those, the more when they come in, we don't recognize them. We don't know them as related to ourselves. We think
That's
it's
right.
something then happening to us, right?
Yep. We can really want to separate and cut off that shadowy side as
Yes.
if it's something that's not meant to pollute the water or something.
Yeah.
It's like, let's get that contaminant out of here. That is like
Right.
some bad stuff. We need to let it go.
Yeah.
When really we know it's so much more than that.
And sometimes, even if it's a good thing, or I'm like quoting that like a good thing or a bad thing, we're dubbing it, tagging it at that.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, a good thing or a bad thing is temporary ultimately. So there's going to be an aspect that we need to shed, let go, let that cycle happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like when we're trying to hold on to the good thing long enough, right? Or waiting for the other shoe to drop. And this is some of the paradox in this conversation, I think, waiting for the other shoe to drop, that we hold on tighter to the good thing and we disassociate. We try to pretend it's that side eye that it doesn't exist, right? That's the whole elephant in the conversation. So that's kind of the foundation, I think, that I wanted us to chat in
Perfect.
today, because it's the scale, if you will, between this less than and
Yes.
more than enough.
Yes.
I think that if we redefine what utopia is, if like that part of the good, part of the natural part of the journey is this dance, is the whole range, is that the shadow part of ourselves and the light part of ourselves both have not only important purposes, but they have a dynamic relationship. So how can we, like for me, myself, I've been asking, I don't really consciously think of it. It's like when I recognize something in myself that's uncomfortable, how can I be with it long enough and just watch anything that wants to come up, the critic, the less than, all of that part long enough before I either try to push it away, because I'm really good. I think you and I are both good at this. Like I'm really good at putting the silver lining on things. I'm really good at being playful. I'm really good at those things. I think are great skill sets and they're part of just who I am. But also, I think it was a way that I protected myself, that I was not going to be the victim. I was going to find the silver lining in anything that happened, but it was in a way to reroute the things that were uncomfortable for me. And that's, in my lifetime, that's played havoc in different ways in my body and in some of my relationships. And, it always comes out somewhere.
It does. I know
It always comes out. So
Hashtag.
hashtag, it always comes out.
Yep.
Hashtag
Ah,
jokes on us. The truth always comes out. That's a
that's
long
right.
hashtag, but so actually, in regard to the truth, many of my mentors I've heard say, how can you find the truth in anything and in everything? And it doesn't mean you have to believe or be that thing,
Yep.
but can you, if you are part of this thread of the range, there's so much I'm either this or that in the world, right? We
Mhm.
can't even have a conversation on this one side because we're so against it
Right.
that we might miss some of the gems that are for us in that container.
That's right.
One of the things that I was noticing in myself, it's not necessarily a new awareness, but you know how you have an awareness and then it kind of continues to deepen. Well, I'm going to share something that makes no sense. It's like something so mundane,
Mhm.
but I have this 5-gallon water jug, and I used to have this, like I have this pump so that I can not have to lift this 5-gallon water jug. And it used to be this manual pump, so I'd be like pumping it, pumping it. Yes, this is going to make sense in a second. But anyway, so I got this cool new automatic one. You press the button and it just does it all by itself. So it's actually convenient
Mm.
and it's relaxing because I don't even have to use my muscle to pump the water out. But the other day I was sitting there, and it's again not a new awareness, but I've been playing with this awareness about myself that I press that button and I have a pretty big, water bottle, and the water can only come out so fast. And I feel this like impatient energy in my body waiting for that water to come out. And it's so physical. It's so in my solar plexus, and enough where, again, not a new awareness. Some of the things I've done, I was telling you earlier that I do this breathing meditation. I'm like, okay. And I count my breath. I either do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But the purpose, like why I'm even doing that, is because I'm trying to be with, like, why the F am I so impatient about this water jug and the
Mhm.
water in my bottle? Like, what is the urgency for me? I was even sharing that sometimes I even do stuff like, I'm like, okay, I start it and I imagine about how long it's going to take and I can do some other things. And this certainly goes into this whole like performance based enough self-worth, as long as we can.
Multitasking.
Yeah,
Multitasking,
right.
yeah.
How much can I do in 1 second to prove that I'm worth living? I mean, that's how
That
ridiculous it
I
is.
got enough done, that I am enough, and I got enough done.
That's right. So now I'm on that enough thing. I can feel I'm in the light. I feel like I'm enough. And a lot of times I imagine that when I'm running around as that water is filling up, really what it is, I'm trying to prove that I'm worthy enough, that I'm enough.
Mhm.
And we become the slave of trying to be enough by trying to avoid the part that doesn't feel like we're enough, which then in turn means we don't even ever really feel like enough. They're just short little dopamine hits of like, I did it.
Yep.
Whatever I did, it is.
Mhm.
And it's a funny little game we play.
And you're flipping that page to the next thing that you can do and be enough at.
Right. Yeah. Because you know what? The next time I fill up my bottle, I'll probably still feel a little impatient. And I've been really noticing that this whole impatience thing and being with it, what it did is, to go back to that analogy we gave of the window
Mhm.
and lowering out the wall and having a bigger view of the same life. Well, I feel like because I've been sitting with this really somatic embodied feeling of impatience inside of me, and in this whole awareness of like, oh my God, I've been able to notice other things in my life that are affected because of that.
Mm.
Not even necessarily as bad or good, but that it's actually revealing to who I am and maybe the places that I've learned to judge or protect myself. I was sharing with somebody that I can read a text or read an email, and I'm of course doing multiple things, right? Not always, but like I read it and I'll go do my thing and I'll think I know what it said. I mean, they're just words, so I think I know how to read and I think I understood what it said, and then I go, wow, that's really interesting that they're saying that. in that way.
Mhm. Mm.
Since I've had this greater sitting with, this feeling of impatience, I've been noticing if something feels a little off, I'm like, is that really what I read? Did I read that correctly? That doesn't seem like it goes and flow with why would this person be saying it this way?
Mhm.
And so I go back, and I've done this several times now. I go back and read the thing, and it's totally, completely different. Like I just read this
Yeah,
email
I've
that
done that.
said, well, what I thought the email said is, I'm certain I sent this to you, blah, blah, blah. And I was already feeling partially unconsciously, but so in the background, I was feeling like I'm not enough. Like, oh, I didn't do this thing in time. I messed up. That's one of my core things. Like I fucked it up. And so I go back because I'm now aware of this. And I go back. This is me hanging a little bit, right? With the shadow part that's just like, what is happening here? And I go back and I read the email. You know what the email said? I am not certain if I sent this to you. So this person was saying, hey, I want to make sure that you know about this thing. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, like, God, they think I forgot about this thing. And this is like,
Yeah.
these is words that are concrete. It's black and white. But
Mhm.
how many things in my world, anyways, am I absolutely sure I think this is what's happening, and how that creates this perpetuation of a story
Yeah.
of that I'm not enough
Yep.
because I'm not looking at it, and I'm in this impatience thing almost feels like, and I don't have this figured out, by the way. It's almost like when I read, I get this way. I miss things sometimes because I'm too impatient to truly sink in and read the thing, that I've missed like a date on something, or it's fascinating, which
Mhm.
again, because I've done that, it actually perpetuates the story. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yeah.
So it's sneaky because I don't have an answer, but I can see what's happening, that I will literally see through my lens of not enough. And I will use the skill set of impatience to somehow reinforce that I fucked up. This
Mhm.
is actually just in as I'm talking to you right now. I didn't really link all those things together.
It makes sense that we have a recruiting part. So when we have maybe our
Yeah.
lead, when we have something that's kind of our go-to, it's that subconscious pattern. There's a support person. There's
Yeah,
a
that's right.
support part that's like, this is so true. I validate you. And then it's important to know that that third perspective is key because there's still a
Mm,
missing piece to that puzzle or whatever it is, the connecting part. Anyway, there's still a side that has a
yeah.
voice. There's still a side that would like to have the floor or the stage or the mic or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I find that the examples I can think of in my mind right now, that side that would be that third perspective is the flip perspective. And that's where, like for your example, the word that you skipped over was the word not. And it was like it made that statement completely opposite. And it's like, wait a minute, how is that the reality, the complete opposite of what I just thought that that was? And there's something about that because, for one, we don't do it 100% of the time. Like, let's give ourselves some credit. There's plenty of times we read shit correctly, get them dates right. Boom. I totally
Hmm.
interpreted those textable words and I felt the emotions of it. Like, we get that shit right all the time. But there's times where it trips us up. And those trip up moments is where that assumption comes into play, which somewhere I heard was like 75 or 95% incorrect. That is like so drilled in my brain that Crystal, if you're assuming something right now, that is probably wrong. Like just chill out
Yeah.
right now. And then the example you gave was like this opposite. And then the times that I'm tripped up, it does tend to be an opposite. There's an opposite perspective in there that's like, hello, me too. I would like to have a say in this.
Hmm. Yeah, which I think comes back to this whole, I don't even know if this makes sense, but like where the polarity becomes a paradox. And I think the difference is the polarity is like they're going against each other, right? They're
Mhm,
opposite and going against each other. I think the paradox is they're different, but they're inclusive of each other. So
mhm,
with the paradox, it doesn't make sense because there's black and white. How
mhm,
can they be the same? But because it's inclusive, it allows for a different reality. And so, like, is it when we are seeing opposite, can that be a moment of like, wow, what inside me? So, what if that shadow part that's hearing, oh, I'm certain I sent that thing to you, you
Mhm.
idiot, you didn't know, like that's not about this person. This is that's 100% about
Mhm.
me. Can I look at that? And I am looking at that. Can I look at that as this place that goes, hey, is there a tender part that is ready to just have you hold it for a minute,
Yeah.
to imagine that you can nurture a part that sees weirdly, hears or reads differently, and that that part can relax a little bit? Is there wisdom in that for me? So that's being with a little bit more of the shadow part, right? The part that, if we were to take shadow as that part that, yes, it can come out as an inner critic, it also could come out if you could use the light, right? If we're in this dynamic between this light part comes in and holds this part that's been tender, that's been sitting in the dark for oh so long.
Yeah.
What does that look
Yeah.
like when you
I
can
like
actually
that.
have them work together?
That's right. It's
And
yeah, it's definitely
mhm,
feels kinder, right? Like it doesn't
yeah,
have to be this thing. Let's say someone observed that in us or whatever, and there's probably a part of us that comes out that's like, oh, like, am I being graded on a test? Or who is this authority figure that looks over me and tells me that I do a certain percentage of life correctly or incorrectly? So just that including part, it kind of takes that judger out of it for me, which is great because I love the if we could just invite everyone to the table and everyone has a place, it takes that, I don't know, that condemning part, that part that says you really messed up. How often do you do that? Whatever shame, blame, that kind of goes away when you're just like
yeah,
looking to and go, oh, this
right.
part doesn't get as much attention and it's got my attention now, and now let's just be with that part. It changes the game, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I think
But
it is
it's
being in
better.
the paradox of it, right? The You just reminded me of a time with my son
Mhm.
Bailey. And I don't know if I told this story on here, but this is so representative of what you just said. And that is that I kind of brought in that light in a moment where he was riding his bike and I was running in front of him. We're going through town and he gets his bike up on the sidewalk. And this woman gave him a look because he shouldn't have had he was like 10. He shouldn't have been riding his bike on the sidewalk. So he goes by, I'm running in front of him, and I hear him under his breath say, idiot, because she gave him a really dirty look, like, you shouldn't be on the sidewalk.
Right.
And I don't even look at him. And I was like, Bailey, and that's all I said in that tone. He said, Mom, I've known you my whole life, and I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that she didn't get enough love when she was a child. And she just needs us to be nice to her. And then he said, this is the most important part, but sometimes you just want to say somebody's an idiot, even though you don't mean it.
Aw.
And I was like, literally, I turned around and I was like, touche. I don't even know if
Yeah.
he knew what that meant,
Yep.
because what he was instilling in me is I have tended to. I
Mhm.
feel like I'm getting better and better at it, but it's not like it's not an end point, right? Life is this journey between what we're talking about, this paradox. And what he taught me in that moment is like, yeah, I get it. But what you're doing is you're not giving me, God, it makes me emotional. You're not giving me the space to be pissed right now. You're
Yeah.
not giving me the space to just express
Yep.
that I'm angry, because my whole thing is I would push to the light. I would push to the light. I once had one of my mentors say, Deb, you've been through a lot of shit in your life really happily. And I wore that as a badge of honor. And the
Mm.
challenge with that is I was rerouting information in my body in order to be that silver lining girl. I needed to not feel other things. I needed to reroute in my neurology things that were difficult. And those, in my opinion, are the things that lead to disease in our body, dis-ease. And they certainly were in different ways. And so he really taught me. That 10-year-old version of him was like, listen, back up. Like, I get her child
Yeah.
needed to be tended, but right now your child needs to be tended. And
Mhm.
you need to me feel angry. That's
Yeah,
my
that's a good
interpretation.
observation because I definitely know I do this often with my kiddos. There's like something that comes up about it's like if you don't I don't know. I'm going to walk myself right into a box on this one.
Oh,
There's something about it
walk it,
though.
baby. Walk the plank.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part that I can definitely see how I do that. Currently, I actively have that reroute, that reframe. And there was something that happened today, even. It's been a series of messages that have come in the past few days. And I thought I had had it all figured out. I was like, oh, got it. I've got this recipe. I know how to respond now. I know how to think about this in my mind, including all things. And then I had this really like
Including everything.
polarized black and white moment. I just had this, we're at two ends of the spectrum just hit so hard, so fast that I didn't even know what to do. And my knee jerk response is you need to go correct that person. Like it is your job to
Mm,
paint this through that you let that person, how did they not know that that is not the way to respond? And I got so caught up that in the moment that it wasn't until I was able to walk away and share with someone else that was not triggering me and be able to have that other perspective come in, then I was able to see this part of me that I never allow to have the stage. And
mm,
that is that vulnerable part that like to
yeah.
be vulnerable in a moment where let's say I felt like I was treaded on to be
Mm,
vulnerable in that moment to say, don't tread on me, that actually hurts my feelings. And to feel the vulnerability in the moment
yeah.
is something that, like, my body just boop, 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 just
Yeah.
not even
Reroute.
sure how to do.
Back out. You get the boop, boop, boop,
Yes.
backing up the truck.
And I was grateful to be able to see that later on. And it
Mm.
doesn't make that moment, of course, acceptable or it doesn't make it untrue, right? That was still a true moment. That was definitely treaded on and
Totally.
not, I feel like, a nice response from someone. And if I let that shadowy side of me have the stage and come and be included at the table and have some light, that is that part of me that I often shut down and do not let have
Mm.
yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
really hear that. And you said something, I feel like this has been coming out a lot in our conversations that it still can be that that's not all right. It can still be that you need to go to that person and share some things that are important. The most poignant thing that just hit me that you spoke to was letting the vulnerable place of you be seen and come up. Now, that might not be in that arena because it might
That's
not be
true.
safe to do that,
That's
but that
true.
doesn't mean that you leave the room for you. You might have to leave the room in that circumstance,
Yep.
but can you at least with yourself or like you said with another person, can you allow that vulnerable place to be like, wow, that hurt? Because we never get to the hurt when we have, it's like internal family systems. You have that protector or firefighter, there's all these different names, but you have that protector that might come in and be like, fuck that. And you might go into a fight, right? And
Mhm.
we all know what it feels like to be, most of us do, that we've been in a fight at some times in our life that we don't even remember what we were fighting for, right?
Mhm.
Because we might have gotten it deeper into a vulnerable place and that fighter is no longer needed, right? Because
Yep.
maybe you've gained a safer container. So I think that it's important to give that space when we say let that shadow, that less than part come in, and be aware of where you want to do that,
Mhm.
and if you are in a place that, because I've certainly done this where I wasn't aware, I was trying to show that vulnerable side for myself, but in connection with somebody, and it wasn't really the best place to do that.
Mhm.
So that's part of
That's a
the
good point.
journey. That's
That's a very good point because there's times where I would internalize that message as it's not okay to be vulnerable. Don't be vulnerable,
yes.
like in general, not even that you
Yeah.
have the option to leave the room. And there's
Mm.
so many other places and ways and people that you can be vulnerable with. And that still allows you to have access to that part of you that will continue to knock on that door until it gets enough showtime.
Totally.
So that
Yeah,
is
because
such a good point. And the thing that I have to let go of control with is that I can't tame this other person to be my safe place. I cannot make this other person be something other than what they are, when they are, how they are. And so I have to dip into my resources and my other tribe. That's why we have so many different people in our lives in the first place. It's not meant to be all on one, and you're not meant to go it alone. So that's a very good point, is to know that you have other spaces and containers to be. And this is
Right.
something else I'll tell myself about, because even when that moment happened, I could feel myself want to reroute it. So I went and started doing work. I was just like, get on your
Yeah.
computer. I put my headphones on. I was like, just listen to music. That didn't even happen. Just nope, it's whatever. And then there was something about me, because we had already been having this conversation a little bit. And I was like, huh, what am I not allowing to come up? And then for
Mm.
me to pause and not go do something else, I could see that little vulnerable piece want to
Totally.
say, I just want some time and space, and it doesn't have to derail you for the whole day. But I would like to be here right now. And it just totally shifted. It shifted everything, being able to do that.
Mm. Yeah, we can make sure you leave the room when it's not a sacred space,
Totally.
but try not to leave the room for yourself,
That's right.
is what I'm hearing,
Yeah,
you
because
know?
that's what I was trying to
And
do. I was like, we're just going to, that lives in a bubble somewhere else.
right, which goes back to that dynamic will happen again and again. Because
Yeah.
if you can't be with that part, because that's where the less than, the not enough, that part that's vulnerable has wisdom to bring to you, to
Yes.
any of us, right? So we never get the wisdom if we go and do and we leave the room of that experience for ourselves, not just that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And then what happens? We walk right into it again and again and
And then
again.
again.
And it's Groundhog's Day because we're like, I don't get it. It hit me off course. What the heck? Even me sharing this about this weird type of impatience, it's such a weird thing to discover deeper for me because I have such value and practice in being present, truly present, which
Mhm.
requires an aspect of patience or bandwidth to be in the moment with people, especially people I'm working with. And people have commented on that. And it's this unconscious, somewhat insatiable desire and value that I have
Mhm.
to truly give people space. So I have this capacity to have patience, right? So this is the
Yeah.
paradox. It's like,
Yes.
what? Why am I impatient with this fucking water? You know what I mean?
That's
And
right.
why am I reading this text wrong? I can just be like, they have nothing to do with each other. Or I can say, they have everything to do with each other and to be revealed because I don't know how it all connects, but I'm starting to, the more that I can let that vulnerable piece go, wow. Because when I read that one email I was just talking
Mhm.
about, before I went back and reread it, I had the pit in my stomach because I was like, oh man, I disappointed this person. Again, I fucked up in some way, right? That's the
Mhm.
sort of core part. I messed up. And so I went into this, it's very subtle for me, and it probably used to be bigger, but I was like, wow, am I that fearful of messing up? I don't see it every day. It is
Mhm.
so masked with all these other skill sets of life. And like you said,
Yeah.
oh, I can go back to work and I left the room and so it's done, right? And
Yeah.
then I go back into that thing and I'm like, oh my God, how did this hit me again? Or why do I keep reproducing this kind of thing, whatever the thing is? For me, I think it comes in a lot of different ways. Now I'm looking at life yet again and going, what are those parts that feel like I'm at fault for everything? And that I'd have to continually do better, notice better. What is that part of me that I can sit with? Like Bailey saying,
Yeah.
mom, back up, give me the space to feel this moment.
That's right.
And where I was I didn't, well, I said Bailey, but I said a tone. He was probably right. I was probably going to go into something similar. It was also freaking hilarious that a
Yeah.
10-year-old was saying that to me.
Yeah. I love it.
But there's that part that his energy was like, look, there's more to this story than
Yeah.
just this thing that you have to give more love. And it's not even about love. Love is there all the time, but love includes all of this,
That's right.
right?
Yes, and that
And
is something
and
I think, whether we say we're doing that, like what you're speaking to, it's impossible to be doing it all the time. And who would even want to do it all the time? Because then that's not a reality. So the more conversations that can be had about this, and the more we allow this exercise and this practice of really bringing it into, I love how you said it's the sacred circle.
yeah.
You hold your own sacred circle. Whether you're participating in that with someone else, you still have your own pillars,
Mm.
8 of them to abide
Yeah.
by. And
Yes.
that's really powerful, and it's healing all in its self. The whole concept of it is, I love that he brought that in there, because especially in mom mode, right? We just can't help it. They're a reflection of us. Am I teaching them well? Did they have, are they even
Yeah.
capable of reflecting this back to us? And then we
Am I
forget.
a good enough mother? Like,
That's
did I
right.
fuck up because he
Yeah.
just called somebody an idiot? I'm not thinking that,
Right.
but that is going on me
Yeah.
and my own perception of being a good mother. And that all goes into this. If we are on the track of just walking and being like, I am bigger than this, these are all important. I am light, I
Mm-hmm.
am love. And we confine love to not include our shadowier, quote
That's
unquote,
right.
imperfect selves, then we're missing love. We're
Yes.
missing the truth when we're like,
Yes.
wow, this hurts. Think about when you really have fallen in love, those first moments, literally simultaneously, you're feeling the fear of losing it,
Yeah.
right? Because that is the polarity, and what I'm suggesting, the paradox of this living of having enough and not having it, of being loved and not being loved.
Yep.
And I think what we're inviting here is that the bandwidth of love includes all of that. The
Yes.
bandwidth of our life includes all of that. And the more that we can look in the mirror and look at the imperfect parts that we can recognize, the paradox is the more perfect we become. And I'm using that word tentatively, but the more beautiful we become because we're becoming more of just the truth, right?
Right.
The realness
Yeah.
of who we are. And that is a relief. That gives me an exhale. That gives me like, oh, thank God. You mean I
Yes.
don't have to be perfect? And we live in the world where you're looking at all the things out there that are showing us how perfect something is.
Right.
And if we go into comparison mode, it's never really helpful,
Yeah.
right? It's never really helpful to be like, these are the things we're not, unless we go, hey, that's inspiring. That's a little different. If we can look and go, wow, I'm really inspired by how this person is, how they're vulnerable, right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
that goes into that. Yes, I can flirt with that. I can be inspired by that. I don't have to compare that I'm less than that, because I know that we all in our humanity, we share this paradox.
Yes.
And we all have our places. And the more we can, I think, share those vulnerable pieces, the more we're giving permission for everybody to do the same. And we
Yeah.
can all exhale a little bit more, and we can
That's right.
all breathe a little bit more deeply.
Yes. I love it.
Okay, so let's end this here in our perfectly imperfect exploration of life. May this be a moment where you can say somebody's an idiot. No, where you can let
May you
yourself be pissed.
May you call it
You
as it is without judgment or
hurting somebody.
remorse.
Right. May you allow yourself, whether it's in the mirror or not, just be the real that you are. Here's to your perfectly imperfect and your imperfect perfect selves. This is the journey. This is the dance. Even if you hear any kind of wobbly, warbly sounds, that's part of the imperfectness of this moment. And we are embracing it, and we hope you do too. Big, big
You
love.
too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall
Found
with Blue Sky Mind.
through the body. It's in and through the body. All along. In and through the body. All along. It's in and through the body. All along. In and through the body. All along. It's in and through the body. All along. In and through the body. All along. It's in and through the body.